I'll give you the Ferrari if you can get it to run, Jonathan. Blackwell's laughter echoed across the luxury car dealership's courtyard as he pointed to a completely wrecked red Ferrari lying in the corner of the parking lot like a monument to failure. Walter Johnson, 72, had only come to pick up his granddaughter, who worked as a receptionist. But when his old Ford pickup broke down right in front of the entrance to Blackwell Luxury Motors, the real estate billionaire seized the moment for his own amusement. "Look, everyone!" Blackwell shouted to the salespeople and customers who began to gather around. "This gentleman here seems to know a thing or two about cars, doesn't he?" Sarcasm dripped from every word as he watched Walter try to start his 1998 pickup. The Ferrari in question, a 2019 model, had been completely destroyed in an accident. Blown engine, bent chassis, fried electrical system. Literally a pile of red metal that Blackwell kept as a trophy from the lawsuit he'd won against the young heir who wrecked it in an illegal race. "5 mechanics have already said it's impossible to fix this machine," Blackwell continued, filming with his cell phone for social media. "But I'm sure someone with your experience can figure it out, right?" Walter slowly got out of the pickup, his calm eyes scanning the Ferrari. The laughter around him grew louder as they noticed his calloused hands and simple work clothes. What none of them saw was the glimmer of recognition that passed through the old man's eyes as he observed certain details in the wreckage. "Sir," Walter said quietly, "may I take a closer look?" Sure, Blackwell said, nearly crying with laughter. "You can even get inside if you want. Just be careful not to hurt yourself on the metal." As Walter approached the Ferrari, ignoring the laughter and malicious comments, something in his posture changed. His fingers brushed the dented hood, and for a moment, an almost imperceptible smile crossed his face. What Blackwell and his privileged audience didn't know was that those calloused fingers had built far more than they could imagine, and what happened next would turn that afternoon of mockery into a moment none of them would ever forget. The humiliation Blackwell had planned as a 5-minute show turned into a spectacle that lasted over an hour. Customers filmed and shared the scene with hashtags like Oldman trying to be mechanic and Ferrari impossible. "Everyone check this out," Blackwell shouted. 30 minutes in and he still believes he can do it. What admirable determination. Laughter echoed as Walter continued examining each component of the wrecked Ferrari with meticulous precision. His granddaughter Rebecca had gone to lunch and hadn't returned, so no one knew she worked there. That made the situation even more amusing for Blackwell, who enjoyed humiliating a stranger without consequence. "You know what impresses me most?" he said to his live Instagram audience of 200,000. "The confidence. Look at him, completely focused, as if he really knows what he's doing." But Walter's steady, precise movements began to unsettle some of the onlookers. These were not the clumsy motions of an amateur. They were the confident gestures of a man who knew every part's place. "Hey, old man!" shouted a salesman named Ryan. "My dad owns a bike shop. I can get you a job there if this doesn't work out." Laughter followed, but Walter didn't look up. At 72, he knew that dignity lay not in words, but in action. His actions told a story none of them were ready to hear. What no one there knew was that Walter Johnson had spent 45 years working on far more complex machines than luxury cars. While Blackwell lived off inherited wealth and real estate deals, Walter had spent decades turning ordinary metal into engineering marvels. 45 minutes, Blackwell said, checking his Rolex. "Impressive. People usually give up at 10. It was then that Walter finally spoke. "Mr. Blackwell, may I ask you a question?" Blackwell hesitated. How did this man know his name? "Have you ever built anything with your own hands? Something that existed only in your imagination and became real through your work?" The question caught Blackwell off guard. "I built a real estate empire," he said defensively. "No," Walter replied softly. "That's not building. That's buying." Silence fell. There was something in Walter's calm authority that clashed with the image of the poor old man everyone had mocked. With each passing moment, it became clear that there were two kinds of men there that day. One who built his life on appearances and privilege, and one who built the world with his hands. 2 hours later, Walter asked for a specific tool. Phillips, number 2, insulated handle. The precision of his request made Ryan stammer. I don't know if we have that. Drawer 3 of the red bench, second shelf, Walter said calmly. Next to the Torx keys. Another silence fell. How did he know exactly where to find tools in a shop he'd never seen? Blackwell tried to laugh it off, but his confidence was slipping. Impressive. You must have worked in many shops to know organization so well. His voice trembled slightly. Then Rebecca returned from lunch, saw the crowd, and froze when she recognized her grandfather. She had worked there for 2 years and knew Blackwell's cruelty well. "What's going on here?" she asked, pushing through. "Ah, an employee!" Blackwell exclaimed, unaware of the connection. "Come see, your friend here is trying to fix a Ferrari 5 expert mechanics called a total loss." Rebecca swallowed hard. She knew who her grandfather was, but also knew revealing it could cost her job. So she stayed silent, trusting the man who had always taught her that patience and quiet skill were stronger than arrogance. Meanwhile, Walter had managed to access the Ferrari's main electrical system. His hands moved with such precision that it began to cause real discomfort among the onlookers. These were not trial-and-error movements. They were the confident gestures of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. "Do you know what the problem is?" Walter finally asked, turning toward Blackwell. This engine wasn't destroyed in an accident. It was sabotaged. The word sent a ripple of murmurs through the crowd. Blackwell laughed, but the sound rang hollow. Sabotaged? What imagination! It was a documented accident investigated by the police. Of course. It was investigated, Walter replied calmly, removing a specific component from the engine. But whoever investigated it didn't know where to look. See here. This wire was cut on purpose, then burned to look like overheating. And this metal part? Twist marks caused only when someone forces a manual brake. The audience leaned in, and even to untrained eyes, the evidence was clear. Someone had deliberately destroyed that Ferrari. "This is ridiculous!" Blackwell snapped, his voice betraying his nervousness. "You can't prove any of this." Walter smiled, not mockingly, but with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had just solved a puzzle. "Actually, I can. Every engine has a unique wear signature. When you've worked with high-performance engines long enough, you learn to read those signatures like fingerprints." Rebecca's heart pounded. She knew her grandfather had spent 40 years as chief engineer of Ferrari's racing engine division in Maranello, Italy, before retiring to the United States. More importantly, she knew he had personally designed that very engine. "Sir," Walter said, locking eyes with Blackwell, "may I ask about the insurance you received for this Ferrari?" The color drained from Blackwell's face. How could this man possibly know about the insurance? The audience had no idea that Walter wasn't just repairing a car. He was dismantling a $1 million fraud with the same precision he had once used to build engines. Each new discovery drew him closer to the truth that would turn the entire spectacle upside down. As he removed the last damaged component, Walter realized he wasn't just confronting prejudice, he was uncovering a crime. Decades of experience had taught him that every flaw has a source, every break tells a story, and every lie leaves traces. 45 years, Walter murmured, still working with surgical precision. That's how long I spent creating engines like this in Maranello, Italy. The word Maranello silenced the entire courtyard. Even the people recording lowered their phones. Only the world's best engineers ever worked there. Impossible! Ryan muttered, his earlier arrogance gone. Walter smiled faintly and removed a metal plate from the engine. Serial number F209WJ447. The initials WJ aren't a coincidence. Walter Johnson. I personally designed this engine in March 2019. Blackwell's face turned ghostly pale. He tried to speak, but only a croak came out. "Mr. Blackwell," Walter continued evenly, "would you like to explain how an engine I designed to be fail-safe suffered damage to the exact 3 components that would yield the highest insurance payout?" Rebecca's eyes widened. She finally understood why her grandfather had endured the humiliation without protest. He was investigating. Walter lifted a part of the injection system. This was deliberately destroyed using a specific technique. The system was forced to run 40% above its heat limit for 4 minutes and 17 seconds, just long enough to cause catastrophic damage, but short enough to appear accidental. The crowd watched in complete silence. Phones were still recording, but this time to capture the truth, not the mockery. "You can't prove any of this," Blackwell shouted, regaining his voice. "It's the word of a black man," Walter finished calmly. "You're right. It would be my word against yours." He pulled out his phone and smiled. "Fortunately, it's not." He held up his screen to one of the recording phones. "I just sent everything, photos, data, and my full technical analysis, to Lorenzo Benedetti, Director of Engineering at Ferrari Maranello." Moments later, Walter's phone rang. "May I?" he said politely, then answered on speaker. "Hello, Lorenzo." "Walter." "Dio mio, I just saw your photos." An accented Italian voice boomed through the speakers. "Questo è impossibile. That's the engine you designed for American customer Blackwell, isn't it? What was it doing in an accident?" "Exactly my question," Walter replied, staring directly at Blackwell. "Especially since this engine has a safety device I designed to prevent the exact kind of failure that supposedly caused the accident." "Walter, my friend, are you recording this?" Lorenzo asked urgently. "I need this for our legal department immediately. That Ferrari was sold with fraudulent insurance." Blackwell stepped forward, panicked, trying to shut off the phone, but Walter moved away effortlessly. "There's more, Lorenzo," he said evenly. "The current owner claims that 5 different mechanics have declared this engine irreparable." "Ridiculous!" Lorenzo's voice thundered through the phone. "You designed this engine to run for 500,000 kilometers without major maintenance. If someone said it's beyond repair, they're either incompetent or lying." At that moment, Rebecca finally stepped forward. "Grandpa Walter," she said loud enough for everyone to hear, "do you need help?" The silence that followed was absolute. Blackwell's eyes darted from Rebecca to Walter, and in that instant he realized the connection that would destroy him. Your granddaughter works here?" he stammered. "For 2 years," Rebecca replied firmly. "And in all that time, I've heard your jokes about people like my grandfather, people who, according to you, don't understand real cars." Walter ended the call with Lorenzo and turned calmly to face Blackwell. "Sir, for 45 years I designed 847 engines for Ferrari. I trained hundreds of engineers. I received 23 international awards for automotive innovation. And today, at 72, I am retired to be close to my family." He paused and looked at the crowd gathered around him, their faces pale and silent. "But I've also learned that some engines, no matter how perfectly built, are sabotaged by people who value money more than integrity." "You can't prove that Blackwell began desperately. "Actually, I can," Walter interrupted, showing his phone. "Because while you were enjoying humiliating an old man who doesn't understand cars, I recorded our entire conversation, including your admission about the insurance payment." Blackwell's face twisted with terror. In his arrogance, he had boasted about receiving $2.3 million for a total loss Ferrari. Walter continued, his voice steady. "And since we're talking about recordings, I imagine the insurance company will be very interested to know that the accident that earned you millions was, in fact, intentional sabotage, documented by the engine's creator himself." Blackwell began to tremble. His real estate empire, built on fraud, was collapsing before everyone's eyes. Worse, his arrogance had been live-streamed to hundreds of thousands of viewers. "Mr. Walter," a customer called out, "can I post this on social media? The world needs to see it." Walter nodded kindly. "Of course, but post this too." He walked to the Ferrari's engine and with slow, practiced movements began reconnecting wires and panels. In less than 10 minutes, the engine that 5 mechanics had declared irreparable roared to life with flawless power. The sound echoed across the courtyard like poetic justice. Blackwell stood frozen, watching his fraud and his pride destroyed by the man he had mocked. Rebecca approached her grandfather and whispered, "How did you know it was the engine you designed?" Walter smiled softly. "When you create something with your own hands, you recognize your work. even in ruins, just as you recognize when someone tries to destroy it. The Ferrari's engine purred perfectly, a living testament to truth and craftsmanship. And as its sound filled the air, one question lingered. What would happen when Ferrari Corporate, the insurance companies, and the authorities received the recordings already being sent to dozens of officials across the world? 3 weeks later, Walter Johnson sat in an FBI office in Los Angeles, watching agents sift through hundreds of documents. His casual recording of an afternoon of humiliation had become the centerpiece of a massive federal investigation into insurance fraud involving multiple corporations and millions of dollars. "Mr. Johnson," said Agent Martinez, peering over her glasses, "your technical analysis was crucial. We discovered that Blackwell Corporation defrauded insurance companies on at least 17 luxury vehicles. Over the past 5 years, always using the same sabotage technique you identified." Walter nodded calmly. At 72, he knew patience was more powerful than anger. "As for Mr. Blackwell," the agent added, smiling, "he was arrested yesterday. Resisting arrest, bribery attempt, obstruction of justice, multiple counts of fraud. He'll be gone for a long time. Apparently, when he realized his accounts were frozen, he tried to bribe the investigator with $200,000. Across town, Rebecca Johnson had been promoted to general manager of the dealership after the previous owner's assets were seized. The company was sold to investors who valued integrity over image, and their first act was to put someone of character in charge. "Grandpa," Rebecca said over the phone, "you won't believe it. Ryan, that salesman who mocked you, came to apologize. He said he hasn't been able to sleep since the video went viral." The video had surpassed 15 million views across all platforms. It wasn't just Walter's humiliation and triumph that captivated viewers. It was the powerful lesson never to judge someone by appearance. Retired engineers from Ferrari, Mercedes, and BMW began sharing their own stories of prejudice. Soon after, Lorenzo Benedetti flew from Maranello to Los Angeles to meet Walter in person. What was meant to be a private reunion became a public event when Ferrari decided to officially honor him. "Walter, my friend," Lorenzo said before a crowd of journalists and enthusiasts, "Ferrari owes a great deal to men like you. Your dedication, precision, and integrity have shaped not only our engines, but our entire legacy." The company announced the creation of the Walter Johnson Scholarship, funding engineering education for talented young people from underprivileged backgrounds. The first class would include 10 students, selected purely on merit. But perhaps the most meaningful change happened back home. In his quiet neighborhood, Walter's garage, once a modest workshop, became a local legend. Young people began visiting him to learn mechanics, eager to study under the man who had humbled a billionaire and exposed corruption. As he guided his students through the intricacies of an engine, Walter would say, "The difference between a good mechanic and an exceptional one isn't in the tools they use, it's in the patience to understand what the machine is trying to tell you." And in that small garage filled with laughter, oil, and dreams, Walter Johnson continued doing what he loved most, building, teaching, and proving that true greatness never needs to boast. It simply endures.